The FIFA World Cup 2026 is happening right now. And somewhere out there, maybe in your living room, maybe in a packed bar, or on a street in Sao Paulo or Laters, someone is crying their eyes out over a soccer match. Not a death in the family, not a breakup, a game. And honestly, that's the most fascinating thing in the world to me. Because here's what nobody tells you. Those tears aren't irrational. Those tears aren't weakness. Those tears are the result of something incredibly deep happening inside the human brain. Something that scientists have actually studied. Something that, once you understand it, is going to completely change the way you see yourself as a fan. There's a reason your chest caves in when your team loses. There's a reason it ruins your whole day, sometimes your whole week. And it has nothing to do with sports and everything to do with who you are as a person. Because here's the wildest part, and I need you to sit with this for a second. Your brain literally cannot tell the difference between you failing and your team failing. Like neurologically, it processes them the same way. And once we go inside the psychology of that, everything makes sense. Let's get into it. So, we just talked about how your brain can't separate your failure from your team's failure. And to understand why that happens, we need to go back to something psychologists discovered decades ago, something called social identity theory. Here's the deal. As humans, we don't just have one identity, we have layers. You're an individual, sure, but you're also part of groups, your family, your city, your country. And your brain? It takes those group memberships personally, like deeply personally. When the group succeeds, you feel it. When the group gets humiliated, you feel that too. Now apply that to sports. The moment you picked a team, maybe your dad put a jersey on you when you were 5, maybe you grew up in the same city, maybe you just felt something watching them play for the first time. Your brain quietly filed that team under "this is part of who I am," not who you follow, who you are. Psychologists actually call this identity fusion, and for true fans, it runs so deep that researchers found something wild. When fans talk about their team winning, they say, "we won." Not "they won," "we." That one little word tells you everything. You're not a spectator. In your mind, you're on the field with them. So, when they lose, you didn't watch a loss, you experienced one. And that distinction between watching and experiencing is what makes sports grief feel so shockingly real. But here's where it gets even interesting, because once that identity is locked in, something starts happening inside your brain that scientists only recently got to see, thanks to fMRI brain scans. So, we just established that your team isn't just a team, it's literally woven into your sense of self. But what does that actually look like inside your skull? Because scientists got curious about the exact same thing, and they did something kind of incredible. They put soccer fans inside fMRI machines and let them watch match footage while scanning their brains in real time. What they found was honestly jaw-dropping. The moment their team scored, a region deep in the brain called the ventral striatum erupted with activity. This is your brain's core reward center, the same region that fires when you win money, when you eat something delicious, when you fall in love. That same ancient circuit, lighting up over a goal scored by someone else, someone you've never met, someone who doesn't even know you exist. But here's the other side of that. When the team lost or when a rival scored, the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thinking and emotional control, went quiet. It basically stood down. Which is why in that moment of loss, you can't think straight. You can't just calm down. The part of your brain designed to do exactly that has temporarily checked out. And it doesn't stop there. Researchers studying fans during the 2010 World Cup final actually measured their hormone levels. Cortisol, your stress hormone, spiked significantly just from watching the match. Not playing, not competing, just sitting there, watching. Your body was treating it like a survival situation. Like something genuinely threatening was happening to you. And honestly, in a psychological sense, it kind of was. Because what we haven't talked about yet is the specific kind of pain a loss triggers, and why research shows it hits almost twice as hard as a win ever feels good. So your brain is flooded with stress hormones. Your rational thinking has basically gone offline, and you're sitting there staring at the screen trying to figure out what just happened. And that feeling? That specific gut punch, hollow chest feeling after a loss? There's a reason it lingers way longer than the joy of a win ever does. Here's something that sounds almost unfair once you hear it. A study out of the UK found that when a fan's team loses, it produces roughly twice as much emotional pain as a win produces happiness. Read that again. The sadness from a loss is about double the joy you get from a victory. So the highs and lows aren't even close to equal. The floor drops out way further than the ceiling ever rises. And this isn't random. It connects directly to one of the most well-established principles in all of psychology, loss aversion. First identified by Nobel Prize-winning psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, loss aversion basically says that as humans, we are hardwired to feel losses more intensely than equivalent gains. It's baked into our evolutionary DNA. Losing resources, losing status, losing safety, those were dangerous in our ancient past. So our brains learned to react to loss with disproportionate urgency. The problem is, your brain never got the memo that this is just a soccer match. It doesn't matter that no one is actually in danger. It doesn't matter that your life is objectively fine. Your brain tagged this team as part of your identity. Remember, we won, we lost, and now it's applying that ancient loss aversion response to the scoreboard. Full force, no filter. And the wilder thing? The more you care, the worse it hits. Researchers found that the intensity of emotional pain after a loss scales directly with how strongly a fan identifies with the team. Casual fans? Shrug it off. Die-hard fans? They're processing it for days. Which raises an uncomfortable question. Why do we keep coming back? Why do we invest this deeply in something that statistically, most of the time, because most teens lose more than they win, is going to hurt us? And the answer to that is honestly one of the most beautiful and strange things about being human. So we just landed on this question. Why do we do this to ourselves? Why do millions of people around the world willingly sign up for an emotional experience that, statistically, is going to hurt them more often than it rewards them? And look, the easy answer is because winning feels amazing. Sure. But that's not the whole story. Because here's the thing. If it was purely about winning, fans would just switch teams every time their side started losing. Pick whoever's on top this season, ride that dopamine wave, repeat. But that's not what happens, is it? Real fans don't do that. Real fans suffer. Real fans watch their team get knocked out of the World Cup in the group stage and come back 4 years later, scarves on, voices ready. And the reason why gets into something that goes way deeper than sports. Psychologists point to two of the most powerful human needs that exist, the need to belong and the need for identity. Not wants, needs, the same category as food and shelter in some psychological models. And supporting a team, being part of a fan community, fulfills both of those at the same time. Think about what game day actually is. You're surrounded by people, strangers sometimes, who feel exactly what you feel. When your team scores, you hug someone you've never met before in your life, and it feels completely normal. Because in that moment, you're not strangers. You're the same person wearing the same colors, carrying the same hope. That kind of instant, deep belonging, it's genuinely rare in modern life. Dr. Adam Borland, a psychologist at Cleveland Clinic, put it perfectly. He said, being a fan creates a sense of collectiveness, people from completely different walks of life, unified by one shared experience. And that sense of collective identity is one of the most psychologically nourishing things a human being can feel. There's also something else happening that people don't talk about enough, the rituals. The jersey you wear on match day, the bar you always watch at, the friend you always call right after the final whistle. These rituals aren't just habits, they're anchors. They give structure and meaning to time in a way that very few things in adult life actually do anymore. Supporting a team gives you a story to be part of. A season is a narrative, struggles, setbacks, hope, heartbreak, and occasionally triumph. And humans are literally wired to seek out narrative. We need to be part of something bigger than ourselves. So when the team loses, you're not just grieving a scoreline. You're grieving a disruption of that story, a rupture in something you've emotionally invested in for months, years, sometimes your entire life. Which brings up something fascinating, because not all fans grieve the same way. And science has actually identified two very different types of fans with two completely different psychological responses to a loss. So we just talked about how a team loss feels like a disruption of your story, your identity, your sense of belonging. But here's what's wild. Not every fan processes that the same way. And the difference between them reveals something really deep about human psychology. Researchers basically split fans into two categories. And once you hear these, you're going to immediately know which one you are. The first type is what psychologists call the outcome fan. For this person, sports is entertainment. It's a product.
When the team wins, they're loud, they're celebrating, they're all in. They wear the jersey, they post on social media, they talk about we. Psychologists actually have a name for this behavior: burging, basking in reflected glory. The team's success becomes their success, and their self-esteem gets a genuine boost from it. But the moment the team starts losing, they quietly disappear. The jersey goes back in the drawer. Suddenly, it's they lost, not we lost.
Psychologists call this corfing, cutting off reflected failure. It's a self-protection move. Distance yourself from the loss before it damages your self-image. Robert Cialdini, the psychologist who first identified burging back in the 1970s, actually observed that college students were 40% more likely to wear their school's sweatshirt on the Monday after a football win. And that same sweatshirt basically vanished after a loss. So outcome fans ride the highs and quietly exit during the lows. Their pain is real, but manageable, because their identity was never fully on the line.
Then there's the second type, the identity fan. And this is where it gets emotionally intense. For the identity fan, the team isn't entertainment, it's a relationship. It's closer to a marriage than a movie. You don't walk on your partner because they had a bad week. You don't stop loving your city because the team had a bad season. This fan's connection to the team is wired through oxytocin, the bonding chemical, the same one that connects you to your family.
The same one that makes you fiercely protective of the people you love. When the identity fan's team loses, they don't corf. They can't. They stay, and they feel every single bit of it. The grief is real. The devastation is real. And here's the psychological kicker. Because their identity is so deeply fused with the team, a loss doesn't just feel like disappointment. It can trigger something that psychologists describe as genuinely similar to personal failure, like they did something wrong.
Like they let people down. And research consistently shows that identity fans experience far more intense emotional lows after losses than outcome fans do. Not because they're weaker, actually the complete opposite. It's because they care more completely and more authentically than almost anything else in their life allows them to.
And here's something that should actually make every identity fan feel seen right now. Studies show that fans with this deep level of identification tend to have higher overall life satisfaction and stronger social bonds than people with low team identification. The same thing that makes the lows brutal is what makes the community so rich, the highs so euphoric, and the whole experience so meaningful.
But there's one more layer to this that most people have never considered. Because the crying, the grief, the devastation after a loss, it's not just about identity or brain chemistry. There's something even more primal driving it. Something that connects sports fandom to how human beings have processed loss since the beginning of time.
So we've established that identity fans carry the loss deep and personal. But here's the part that I think is going to genuinely surprise you, because what fans experience after a crushing defeat isn't just sadness. According to psychologists, it follows a pattern that looks remarkably similar to actual grief. like the kind of grief we normally associate with losing something that actually mattered. And before you roll your eyes at that, hear me out, because the research backs it up completely. Dr. Adam Borland at Cleveland Clinic pointed out that fans often develop what's called a parasocial relationship with their team and its players. Parasocial means one-sided. You know them, they don't know you. But your brain doesn't fully register that distinction. Over months and years of watching, of celebrating with them, of suffering with them, of learning their stories and their struggles, your brain starts processing them almost like people in your actual life. So when a player you followed for years breaks down on the field after missing the decisive penalty, when you've watched him work his whole career toward this one moment and you see it slip away, your brain isn't watching a stranger. It's watching someone it knows, someone it cares about. And the pain of watching that, it activates the same neural pathways as watching someone you genuinely love go through something devastating. And then there's the collective dimension of it, which somehow makes everything more intense. Think about the World Cup specifically. This isn't just your team. This is your country, your flag, your culture. Every person who looks like you, sounds like you, grew up where you grew up, they're all feeling this at the exact same time. That emotional contagion is real, and it's been studied. Research from the University of Michigan found that people at sporting events literally absorb the emotions of those around them. It spreads like a ripple through the crowd, which means when things go wrong, you're not just processing your own grief, you're processing the grief of thousands of people simultaneously. And that collective devastation, it's overwhelming in a way that's almost impossible to describe unless you've lived it. Here's what's really fascinating, though. Psychologists have actually documented that sports fans cycle through stages after a major loss that mirror Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's classic stages of grief. There's the immediate shock and denial. I can't believe that just happened. That referee was a disaster. That goal shouldn't have counted. Then comes the anger. Then the bargaining. If only we'd subbed him off earlier. If only we'd played a different formation. Then the quiet, heavy sadness that settles in the day after. Then, eventually, acceptance. Real grief. For a game. And here's the thing. Dismissing that as overreaction completely misses the point. Because what people are grieving isn't really the scoreline. They're grieving the hope they carried, the version of the future they'd already started imagining in their head, the celebration, the pride, the story they were going to tell their kids someday. That imagined future felt real, and when the final whistle blows the wrong way, that future dies, and you grieve it. Sports psychologist Vanya Radek put it beautifully. The connection fans have to a team fulfills two of the most fundamental human needs simultaneously, the need to belong and the need for identity. When a loss disrupts both of those at once, the emotional hit isn't just sadness, it's existential. But here's something nobody talks about in the aftermath of that grief. There's actually a hidden psychological gift buried inside it. Something that makes the pain, believe it or not, worth it. So we just sat with something pretty heavy. Sports grief is real. The brain science is real. The emotional devastation is real. And if you've ever cried over a match or felt that hollow emptiness for days after a loss, I hope by now you understand that there is nothing wrong with you. That's not weakness. That's the cost of caring deeply. And caring deeply is one of the most human things there is. But here's the part I really want you to hear. Because buried inside all of that pain, inside the tears, the cortisol spike, the grief stages, all of it, there is something genuinely valuable. Something that makes the whole roller coaster worth riding. Shared grief builds bonds that shared joy simply cannot. Think about that for a second. When your team wins, everyone's celebrating, everyone's euphoric, it's a party. That feels incredible, but it's also kind of surface level, right? Winning is easy to enjoy together. Losing is hard to endure together. And there's something about surviving the hard things side by side, about crying in the same room, about feeling the same devastation at the same moment that creates a depth of human connection that's almost impossible to manufacture any other way. Psychologists have actually found that shared painful experiences accelerate social bonding faster than shared positive ones. The people you watched that heartbreaking match with, You are closer to them after that loss than you were before it, whether you realize it or not, because you were vulnerable together. And vulnerability is the foundation of every real human connection. And there's something else, something even more personal. The fact that you can feel this much about something, that is not a flaw in your psychology. That is evidence of your capacity for deep attachment, for loyalty, for love, honestly. The same emotional wiring that makes a World Cup loss feel catastrophic is the exact same wiring that makes you capable of loving your family fiercely, of being a loyal friend, of caring about something bigger than yourself. You can't have one without the other. The fan who cries when their team loses isn't someone who needs to get a grip. They're someone whose heart is genuinely open. An open heart gets broken sometimes. That's the deal. But a closed heart never gets to feel the eruption of joy when your country lifts the trophy either. It never gets to feel that rare, electric, once-in-a-lifetime moment of collective human triumph. And there's a broader psychological truth hiding in here too, one that researchers who study post-traumatic growth have documented extensively. Humans who allow themselves to fully feel difficult emotions, rather than suppressing them or dismissing them, consistently show greater emotional resilience over time. They recover faster, they connect deeper, they live richer emotional lives. So, the fan who lets themselves cry, who sits in the feeling instead of running from it, psychologically, they're actually doing something healthy, something brave. Right now, with the World Cup happening as we speak, millions of people are going through exactly this. Hearts are getting broken in real time across every continent. And every single one of those people, every crying fan, every stunned supporter staring at the screen in disbelief, is experiencing one of the most intensely human moments available to us in modern life. A moment of caring so completely about something that losing it actually hurts. That's not something to be embarrassed about. That's something to understand. And now, you do. But before we wrap up, there's one final piece to this I want to leave you with. Because understanding why you feel this way is one thing. Knowing what to actually do with it is another. So we've come all this way. We've been inside the brain scans, through the grief stages, past the identity science, and hopefully by now, the way you see yourself as a fan has shifted a little. Because understanding the psychology behind something doesn't just make it more interesting, it actually gives you power over it. So let's talk about what to actually do in those moments, when the final whistle blows the wrong way and it all comes crashing down. First thing, and this sounds almost too simple, let yourself feel it. Seriously. Don't rush past it. Don't immediately grab your phone and start scrolling. Don't tell yourself you're being ridiculous. Psychologists who study emotional regulation consistently find that suppressing emotions, pushing them down, dismissing them, performing "it's just a game" energy when you don't actually feel that, backfires hard. Suppressed emotions don't disappear, they just go underground and come out sideways. As irritability, as restlessness, as a bad mood you can't explain 3 days later. Naming the emotion out loud or even just acknowledging it internally actually reduces its intensity. There's a whole body of neuroscience research behind this, sometimes called affect labeling. The simple act of saying, "I'm genuinely gutted right now," activates the prefrontal cortex, remember, the rational brain that went quiet during the loss, and helps bring it back online. You're not wallowing, you're processing. There's a real difference. Second thing, find your people. Go be with whoever else watched that match. Talk about it, groan about it, laugh about the absurdity of it together. Because remember what we talked about, shared grief accelerates bonding. That conversation you have in the rubble of a loss, that's not just venting. That's connection. That's community doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Third thing, and this one's for the identity fans especially, give yourself a timeline. Research on sports-related mood disruption shows that die-hard fans can carry the emotional weight of a big loss for anywhere from 2 to 4 days. That's normal. That's your brain working through something it genuinely experienced as a setback. But if you're still in active grief a week later, 2 weeks later, if it's affecting your sleep, your work, your relationships, that's worth paying attention to. Not because the feelings aren't valid, they are. But because at that point, the psychological tools that help aren't sports-specific, They're just good mental health practices. Talk to someone, move your body, let the narrative shift. And here's the reframe I want to leave you with on this. In psychology, there's a concept called post-traumatic growth, the idea that humans don't just survive difficult experiences, they can actually grow through them, become more resilient, more empathetic, more self-aware on the other side. And sports losses, when you sit with them honestly, can genuinely do that. Every fan who's lived through a heartbreaking loss and come back the next season, jersey on, voice ready, hope somehow still intact, has practiced one of the most important psychological skills a human being can develop: the ability to invest fully, lose painfully, grieve honestly, and then choose to care again anyway. That's not naivety, that's not delusion, that's one of the most psychologically sophisticated things a person can do. So right now, in the middle of World Cup 2026, whether your country just went through or just got knocked out, whatever you're feeling is real. The science says so, the research says so, and honestly, you say so. Trust that, because the capacity to feel this much, it's not your weakness, it's your superpower. We started this video with someone crying over a soccer match, and I asked you to sit with the idea that those tears aren't irrational, that they're actually the result of something deeply, scientifically, beautifully human happening inside your brain. And now you know exactly what that something is. Your identity, your belonging, your brain's ancient wiring, your open heart doing exactly what open hearts do. So the next time you or someone you love breaks down after a loss, don't reach for "it's just a game." Reach for this instead. This is what it looks like when a human being cares about something completely. And that is never something to be ashamed of. If this video made you see yourself differently as a fan, even just a little, hit that like button and subscribe. Every week on this channel, we go deep into the psychology behind the things you feel but can't always explain. And right now, with the World Cup in full swing, there's no better time to understand your own mind. The game goes on. So does the love for it.